for today, we're continuing on in our series on fullness and its relationship to the fruits of the Spirit. How many of you know what we talked about a month ago, which I know that's probably a very vague, broad question. Not all of you were here a month ago, but we've already done one fruit of the Spirit. Who could tell me what fruit of the Spirit we've covered? Fullness of. You have a 1 in 9 shot.
It's the last one, right?
No, the last one is what we're doing today, actually.
Oh, just kidding.
So that's a hint for what today is about.
Was it kindness?
Nope.
Okay, what was kindness? Self-control?
That's today.
That's today.
Yeah, that's the last one. Very good.
That was the last
Yeah, we got the preview. Thank you, Sydney. Yeah, you got a spoiler alert that. Yeah, that probably helped a little bit.
I didn't see that though.
That might be a little bit.
Love.
Close, joy. We talked about fullness of joy.
Close.
Love, joy. No, literally is close. It's like love, joy, peace. Those are the first 3 fruits. We're talking about the last fruit of the Spirit today, and the reason why is because Eliana suggested we do that. For those of you who might have missed the first episode, you guys are calling the shot as far as what fruit of the Spirit we talk about next. So after we're done with self-control today, one of you, probably not Eliana because you chose the last one, a different youth will choose the next one. And that's how we're going to roll with Sunday mornings. This will probably take us through Thanksgiving, y'all, so I'm really excited about this. I really feel like this is where God wants us to camp out in the months ahead. I know in the past couple of months, like for the summer, there's been 2 different tracks going on. The 6th and 7th graders been doing their sort of the Spirit track with the Ericksons, and we've been talking about fullness in relation to unity and quantity in the body of Christ. But we're going to keep in that fullness vein, just redirected towards how it connects to the fruits of the Spirit. So today we're going to define self-control. We're going to examine it in the Word. We're going to discuss some practical application and then close with some case studies, some Bible characters who were good and who were not so good with self-control. But before I do that, I want to write on the board the Google definition of self-control. Because I'm always, not that Google is the end-all be-all, but I'm always curious what, like when you type in self-control, in a web search, what comes up? All right. What we're going to do, guys, I'm not signing off on this. What I want us to do is actually critique it, and at the end, we're going to take what we learned and we're going to redefine it. The Google definition of self-control is the ability to control oneself. Whoa. Particularly one's emotions, not talking, use self-control, guys, come on, level up. Desires and the expression of them in behavior, especially difficult situations. When I say self-control, what immediately pops in your head? I always like asking this question because you get a different array of answers. Yes, Sydney?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this
That's a good
isn't,
one.
like, this is just what popped in my head.
That's
So it's
this
not
is a
like-
big question.
Yes!
That might be the lack thereof.
Yeah. All right, Landon.
I'm thinking of a song I was taught when I was little about the fruits of the Spirit. That's what I think of.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember the song too. I remember the melody and everything.
No one really understands what meekness is, but we all.
Meekness is one of my favorites. Blessed are the meek. It's also in the Beatitudes. When I think of self-control, I think of a caboose on a train. Because again, like the caboose, just like the caboose is the last car on a train, self-control is the last fruit of the Spirit. And I believe that that's not by mistake. I believe that there's a reason why love is the first beatitude and why self-control is the last one. So when you look at that order in Galatians, that's one of those things you need to ask yourself, like, I don't believe that the author just put them there. What comes to mind first? Love. Oh, what comes next? Okay, joy, peace, and you just kind of go in the flow of the moment. I believe there's a rightful order, just like we talked about with the Beatitudes a couple of years ago, where there's a specific reason to the order of how they're presented. When I think of self-control, I also think of a container for the other spiritual fruit to thrive in. I don't know if you guys have a fruit bowl, or maybe think of like a vase for different flowers you might have. But basically, it's a container for other spiritual fruit to thrive in, the fruit that binds the rest together, not to mention a baseline for power and love, which comes from 2 Timothy 1:7. So again, there's a reason why self-control is the last one mentioned. So imagine if I got the joy, joy, joy down in my heart. I learned that a lot as a kid. But I pity the fool clothesline someone who gives me a dirty look. Or I love someone, but I compromise sexually. What if I walk in peace, but I'm impatient when I'm not? Or I'm kind and faithful on the outside, but not so much on the inside. Self-control is the glue that connects a lot of these together. And when we look at worldly definitions, when I look at the Google definition, I'm not saying, oh man, that's terrible, that's wrong. I just say it's incomplete. That's the difference. I just look at this and say there's so much more to self-control than just a temperament or a disposition of personality. It's more than even just conquering temptation, even though it's a big piece of it. A lot of times we think of self-control, and it's like it's the will that I summon to not sin, and that's true, but there's, again, so much more. We're going to talk about that more today. I submit that self-control is about being a conqueror, more than a conqueror, as Paul says in Romans 8, resisting temptation to sin and reacting after referencing God first. So, again, seeing the dependence, the reliance on God in that. Jesus did that, by the way. You know, we're going to use him as a case study in a moment, but we look at his life when he was on earth and we say, oh, he was perfect. He had it going for him. Could he have done it without God's help? I think that, you know, there's a reason why why he sought God time and time again. Garden of Gethsemane, you know, where it's like, you know, he had that temptation come, like, if it's any other way. Or, you know, there's other case studies we'll look at in a second. Maybe you're thinking, I thought self-control is completely contained within the individual. Again, that's what the world tells you, that it's all in and within yourself. And that's true from a free will perspective, but when you think about it, even though self may be in the title of self-control, if we're depending on ourselves apart from God's help, can we really expect to live a holy life that is pleasing to God? The way I see it, while we can't ask God for self-control by way of free will, we could call upon God to give us strength so that we can be able to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. One of my favorite verses, 2 Corinthians 10:5. If only Samson did that more often, right? We all know who Samson is, right, in the book of Judges. He was given supernatural strength. He had the strength, but he didn't have the self-control. He couldn't get over those Philistine women, right? So self-control is different than the other fruits of the Spirit in the sense God doesn't give self-control specifically like he gives love, peace, patience, etc., but he calls and provides us with what we need to live it, to resist temptation, and grow in perseverance, which is an underrated part to this whole self-control life. Self-control not only is like, you know, in the moment where, you know, yes, I resisted the temptation to sin, but it's building courage, it's building perseverance, it's building strength so that becomes your default when you face challenging situations and temptation in the future, where it's like becomes more second nature. So it's really, there's a conquering the flesh element that I really love about self-control. Romans 7:23 says, I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. Paul is describing this pull of human nature that makes us think that sin is natural and okay. We see this when we watch sitcoms and we watch TV shows, and we see all this sin decorated throughout the plot line, and you know, it's easy for it to kind of sink in, like, yeah, okay, well, maybe it's not such a big deal like I've been making it out to be. But when we talk about naturally in worldly terms, we're talking about our desires being more important than truth, and also blinding us to that truth, robbing us from seeing how God sees. Natural in the spiritual realm, in spiritual terms, however, that's talking about our original design and what God intended from the beginning. So as godly Christians, we must recognize that self-control helps us stay visually attuned to the light of the gospel, the truth of God, the essence of his word, since it helps us deny our natural in place of God's. That's what self-control is all about. It's like, how does God's natural become my natural? 1 John 2:15 through 17, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, i.e. Samson, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it, but he who does the will of the Father abides forever. How many of you in those moments where you struggle with self-control could sense the battle going on in you? It's like it's like that scene from one of my favorite scenes from Emperor's New Groove. Okay, yeah. Remember that scene with the shoulder angel and the soldier, the shoulder devil, with Kronk? Oh my gosh, that cracks me up.
Kronk.
Reason number 2. Look what I can do. What does that have to?
No, he's got a point.
Yeah. There you go. You know exactly the scene I'm talking about. We have that exchange where it's like we could feel the presence on both sides, and it's like, ugh. How do we yield to the Lord? that's kind of one of those fundamental questions when we talk about self-control. It's all about, how do I reference God in those moments? Because if we're relying on ourselves, we can't do it. And I think some of us have tasted that in my room. When I try to do it, maybe I could find victory in one or two instances, but eventually, if I'm not in that pattern of reverencing God, I'm gonna eventually go back to the old way. All is making sense. So I'm kind of blitzing through this, so sorry for the fast pace, but I do want to get your input on some application on how we actually live this. Hint, living self-control, you know how I mentioned it's like the glue, like the container for the other fruits of the Spirit. How we live self-control does involve those other 8.
So, one of the first things I always think of is with peace. There's a verse that talks about, as far as it is with you, be at peace with all men. And when I think of like self-control, or the moments where I've needed to exert the most self-control, a lot of time it's been in conversations. Like I can think back to when I was a teenager, and my dad would be like super mad about something, and he'd be like, you know, like that moment where they're either like yelling a little bit, or they're using the really intense quiet voice, and you're like, right? And you're just like,
yeah.
and it's, okay.
He's like trying to
My
convey.
mom
Yeah.
like so sometimes gets to the point where she's like smiling, and it's actually really scary because she looks like a crazy person laughing.
I've seen that.
It's like that emoji.
But we,
Like
so
they're
what I'm
gritty.
saying is we all know those moments, right? But you know those moments where maybe they're not warranted? Like your dad doesn't, because we had the policy in our house, which was obey first, ask questions later, like don't argue, we will discuss it afterwards. But like in conversations like that this was not a discussion point. This was a dad being dad point. And I had the choice to either be a teenager, you don't know, blah, 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 or whatever the case is, which how many of you guys have done that and discovered that never works out well, right?
Yeah.
It never makes the situation better. It always kind of makes it a lot worse, right? And so I can remember sitting there and being like, oh, I so just want to say this. I want to say this so bad. And then being so tempted to do it, and then sitting there going, if I say that, I'm pretty sure this
Nothing
is just
good's
going to
gonna come out of it.
escalate.
Yeah.
And when my dad got really mad, he would leave and go for a walk. And you knew at that point, like, when he got back, it was not, like, if he was leaving, it's because he was so mad, it was going to be bad for him to stay around you. So I knew, if I say this right now, pretty much the reaction I'm going to get is Dad's going to go on a walk, and we're still going to have to come back and deal with this. Or I could hold my tongue, wait till we've calmed down, and come back and discuss this later.
Yeah.
And normally when I did that, he'd be like, okay, I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'm sorry I overreacted. And we would actually have a discussion as opposed to escalating a situation. You know what I mean? So when I think of self-control, I think of how it relates to peace.
Mhm.
Because I could have easily sucked the last little bit of peace out of the situation and created tension in the house for like 2 or 3 days. But by just like resisting that urge to get my 2 cents in or be heard or whatever the case was, it restored peace sooner and then actually allowed us to move on from the situation and avoid that again in the future. Didn't mean it was always easy. Didn't mean I always did it. But I'm just saying, I can distinctly remember those points.
I have a story.
At school, during I think one of our pep rallies, there was this group of guys, and you know, like the guys that don't usually behave, and one came down and hit me like on the back of my head, and just went back up, and I felt them all like staring at me, waiting for me to do something, and I just didn't, because I knew that situation just wouldn't work out well.
Mm-hmm.
And then they all came down and said, why didn't you hit back? Because I don't like hurting people. That's what I said, but
You turning the other
then
cheek,
we were-
literally.
we actually became very good friends after that. Still don't quite get along with others, but they're nice to me, and I'm trying to
Your
like
bodyguards.
help them
Yeah.
learn that it's not nice to hit or otherwise hurt other people.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
My brother used to have a book because he had a really bad problem with biting and hitting. So he had another biting book, but there's a book that said, hands are not for hitting. It was like, hands are used for high five. Hands are used.
Well, but in both of these, on all these stories, you could see the peacemaking aspect to it. And the reason why we're talking about this is like, whenever you think of love, you think of peace, think of patience, there's always an element of self-control behind it that we underestimate. So I like this. I like how we're talking about self-control and how it relates to peace and patience. But wait, there's more.
Well, no, I really like what you said about being a bridge.
Yeah.
And that's what self-control really is. It's like self-control is the gas we put in the vehicle of the other fruits. You know what I mean? Because like,
Ooh, I like that.
the Lord can, what is the fruits of the Spirit? It's fruits that are cultivated by the presence of the Holy Spirit in our life as we're aligning ourselves to Him, right? So as we are getting more immersed in the Holy Spirit, more immersed in the things of Christ, we develop more love, we develop more peace, more joy, like all these different things. But then self-control is the gas that actually lets us walk in it. Because even though those fruits are there, like if I have a bowl of a really pretty like apples and oranges and all this kind of kiwi, right? It's all sitting in the bowl on the table. I can choose to get that for a snack, or I can go get the ding dongs or granola bars or whatever ice cream. I can choose something else. You know what I mean? It's still always my choice, and so there has to be the deliberate response that says, I'm going to choose this now, not this. And I think that's where self-control comes in. Self-control is what allows us to walk in. And so I really like that picture of a bridge. It's like Holy Spirit saying, here's peace, and you're going,
yeah. Scale.
peace, justice, peace, getting this off my chest, peace,
Yeah, yep.
Like all these different things. And self-control is then what helps us go peace or love or joy. You know what I mean? Like you're having a really crappy day and you really just want to be emotional and moody. Have you ever just woken up and you're just like, I am miserable today. And you know what? Everyone else needs to be miserable with me.
Yes.
You don't really think that. But it's like you see happy people and you just want to punch them in the face and you're like, and again,
Because we want people to relate with us. That's the temptation.
There's
It's like
something, it's that whole misery loves company. And so I can choose to extend my misery to other people and make them all miserable, like the silent treatment you give your mom, or
siblings.
the sideways look you give your friend, or the whatever, hitting your sibling because they just got within arm's reach. And let's be honest, we've all done that, right? Okay, let's be honest. We can say they started, but really they just got too close sometimes. Let's be real.
But that's how they started.
They should have felt the boundary. We should have been like mowing across the It's true. But so we can or we can choose joy that says everything about this may make me not happy.
I was about to say that.
But I can still choose joy right now. And I can choose to not let how I feel be impacted by the circumstances around me. So therefore, I utilize self-control. I choose to put my moody moose crankiness down.
Moody moose.
So my dad used to have a book, and it was literally this story about like
a moody moose.
there were all these. I don't remember a lot. I just remember there were these animals, and there was a moose, and the moose had these pins that were like happy and sad and whatever.
So not Bullwinkle,
Moody Moose.
apparently.
And it was like depending on how the moose was feeling, he wore these different. It was from the 70s, so it was a messed up time.
Makes
frame.
sense.
But that was like the point of reference in our house was my mom would be like, "Are you being a moody moose?" I'd be like,
Can we continue that? I like that. Moody moose.
Great mental.
No, I love that you said that. Choosing joy when you don't want to be. There's definitely self-control in that. Anytime you have to die to the flesh, there's self-control involved. Yeah.
I was thinking that self-control kind of went with patience. Like this morning, my brother woke up.
He woke up. Yeah. Good.
He had
Good.
a choice
Cool
to
story,
go
bro.
get dressed or brush his teeth, and I was getting my hair done, and this is a pretty small bathroom. So I said, "Hey, Cohen, could you go get dressed first?" And he went, "You can do your hair outside."
Whoa.
So he pushed me out. Yeah.
Like, no, you didn't.
I'm in my 30s and I'm already going, oh no.
Oh, yeah. And so I was done with my hair, so I was going to brush my teeth. And Cohen would not, he was like taking over the sink and he refused to budge from that spot. So I pushed him so I could get, a little bit in the mirror. And
Bribery works.
he had toothpaste in his mouth, and he pretended he was going to spit on me. And then I got on my feet.
Whoa.
And
Did your feet
for some
tingle?
reason, Cone was mad at me.
That's
So we went to church this morning. On the way walking up. Yeah, this morning. On the way walking up.
Why are we standing at the door?
He kept looking. Sorry, he kept looking behind me, back at me, making sure he was blocking my way. Or then he would stop right in front of me so that I couldn't walk past. And if I did go around him, he would elbow me.
It helps.
8.
You have the age and the height and the strength advantage.
And I went, Cohen, I am twice your height, and you can't pick up half a jug of milk.
Just wait. There comes a point.
He goes, can you hold the cup?
That is
Sorry.
hilarious.
And
You
so,
can't pick up a half jug of milk.
so he was signing in, and I was walking past to go down, to worship, and I look back at him, and he goes,
He does that.
so
He's 8. Remember this, okay?
this is a regular day-to-day thing.
Yeah.
So I was saying,
I could relate
as
to
I
a
was
little
saying,
bit.
patience really goes to self-control. I could have done more than I did.
It does put other needs
There's
first.
a range of self-control.
Well, this ties into kindness too. Putting other needs before your own.
Yeah. I knew that if I pushed my brother to the ground, I would get a lecture from my mother. That I'm stronger than him.
Hey guys, let's bring it back a little bit. Show,
And that
Sydney's
he
still
would
sharing.
say he's a work in progress. And
Yeah. Aren't we all though?
That's
Yeah. Oh.
The fact that you
Cheers.
can have that conversation with yourself, even now, and I'm gonna let you guys. How many of you guys raise your hand if you have siblings?
Yep.
I'm sorry, Reese.
And Caden,
Give me my sibling, okay?
you're a sibling. Hear that, everything?
Okay.
Sometimes I wish I could do that to my parents.
Okay. Well, there you go. So something you're gonna learn about family, and I know I can't make it easier for you because you still have to walk the path, but this revelation could make it a little easier. God is really gracious in that He gives us family because it refines us and it pulls all that junk and human nature to the surface. Okay, and it's a lot better to deal with that with family than with coworkers and people, strangers on the road who piss you off when they cut you off in traffic. Like
Yes,
it's
my
much
bane.
better to deal with that in a place where people love you. And yes, they're the people that make you the most irritated, and they're the people that test every fruit of that spirit every moment of every day, especially if you're an oldest,
They cut the kiwi.
right? Because then it's not just, yes, they do. They sit there and they
Squirt it in my eye.
right? They want to touch it all and just bounce it. And you're like, oh. But here's the thing. If you look at it, and you look at your interactions with your siblings, you look at your interactions with your parents, as an opportunity to see this fruit being developed in you and cultivated. Okay?
I can't really look at them.
Imagine how strong a crop of fruit you'll have once those interactions are more with, with coworkers or whatever. And I'm gonna give you guys a secret. Okay? It continues when you get married. It continues when you have kids. I can't tell you, Caden doesn't even have the cognitive ability to realize he's frustrating me. And he already does. And I love him so much, and we all can agree that he's like amazing, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there are some times when I literally, I sit there, I'm like, I want to be able to reason with you because you're being ridiculous. There is poop all over your butt. Please stop trying to roll over and you are going to get it all over everything. Like, stop. He's like, no. Like,
Hashtag.
no self-control.
He literally was like,
He has no fruit of the spirit yet. It has not been cultivated. Okay.
His nose are hilarious.
So yeah, because he goes no. This dramatic no,
No.
and then you want to laugh, but you're like. No. So I say that to say, family, unless you become a hermit, will always be the testing ground for the fruit in your life.
Yep.
Okay? How you treat your family
That's good.
is how good your fruit is, not how you treat the person you see for 5 minutes. Okay?
This is true. Yeah, that's a good point.
So
Family helps,
So
refine you.
FYI, Look and see how you respond to your siblings. Look and see how you respond to your parents. Look and see how you respond to your, you don't have spouses,
Future spouse.
but I'm just saying us. Okay? And that is the quality of your fruit.
Let's go see him.
If you're a hermit, what's the testing ground?
Apparently yourself, because we're probably having messed up conversations with you because we are still human. I'm just going to be like, shut up.
Um,
I'm going over here.
so we're a couple minutes over, but this is good. I love the conversation this morning. So just a few others. I kind of talked about godly love instead of lust and infatuation. We talked about joy, peace, patience, kindness, being faithful even when mocked by scoffers, being gentle, showing compassion and mercy. That's meekness and in love as God does with us. But one thing I want to share before we get out of here is that a lot of times we talk about self-control, we don't think of this particular passage in the Bible. We're going back to Genesis again, and we're talking about the first human murderer, who was
Cain.
Cain. Yeah, Cain killed his brother Abel, right?
Yeah.
So Cain was the first murderer. Yes. So I was going back to that passage the other day, and I was just reading what God says to him after the murder's taken place, and he says to Cain, "Why are you angry, and why is your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire for you, but you should rule over it." This is happening after murdered. Like, it blows my mind. That's Genesis 4, 6 through 7, by the way. And so it reminds me that God has not only given us, by his strength, we have the ability, but we have the authority to be more than a conqueror, to defeat the temptations, the lies of the enemy, and persevere in victory. And I wrote here, we already talked about self-control as a bridge, that has God now. But my last sentence in my notes, self-control is the bridge between dying to oneself and trusting God's best. If you walk across it, you'll find victory every time.